It really all started with Simon Longland, an architect, an old friend of mine from university, who was living in Melrose at the time, and he became more and more aware of the fact that it was a nonsense that the border should be the only region of Britain without a rail service, totally dependent on road transport. And he thought from an economic and environmental point of view, that wasn't a sensible place to be. So Simon took it upon himself with his motorbike to cover the whole of the former Solum of the Waverley Route from the edges of Edinburgh right down to Carlisle and look at the state of all the structures, how many were missing, how many were still there, and make a photographic record of it. And indeed he produced a comprehensive report which showed that while there had been quite a lot of breaches in the line, quite a lot was still there. But his big worry was that at that time there were plans to dual the A7 north of Gala, and his feeling was if the A7 was dualled, that would obliterate much of the railway, and that opportunity to have a sustainable and civilised form of transport into the borders would be lost. So Simon did his groundwork then, and that eventually led to the setting up of a company which he formed called Borders Transport Futures. And BTF, as they were known, did a lot of work, not just on the prospect of a railway north from Gala or Tweedbank to Edinburgh, but also looked at the prospects for carrying timber on the southern third of the railway from Kielder Forest and Riccarton Junction down through to Carlisle. And BTF came very, very close to lodging plans in Parliament in Westminster for reopening the southern third of the line for timber traffic. But for a number of reasons, Railtrack pulled out, they stopped supporting the prospect. Timber prices were falling internationally because of imports from the Baltic, so their timber carrying scheme was scuppered. But BTF, make no mistake, put this whole reopening on the agenda. And then in the late 1990s, when there were more and more factory closures in the borders, culminating with Via Systems in Selkirk and Gala, more than 900 jobs lost, the Scottish office, as was then, were able to pick up the BTF feasibility studies, take them off the shelf, dust them down, and there they had an economic regeneration project for the border. So that's really how it all started, how it became a mainstream project. The campaign for Borders Rail was the other key grassroots element of where the reopening campaign really got going, and that was in 1998-99. And CBR got their act together, they got out in the streets, they were chaired by Petra Bieberbach, the first chair. She came to the borders from Northumberland, was astonished there was no railway there, and got together with like-minded people like Bill Jimison of Stow, who's been a rail campaigner ever since. They got a big petition together with more than 17,000 signatures. They got out on the streets speaking to people to persuade people that they really could get the railway back. So the combination of BTF on the one hand and CBR on the other hand meant that this railway was becoming realistic, and the mainstream political agenda was able to take it on board from 1999, and since then central government and local government have pushed it through with some strong leadership, particularly from Scottish Borders Council. In the early days, the leader of the council was Drew Tully, and he backed the creation of the railway, as did John Scott, or JR as he was known at the time, and he pushed very strongly for the railway. And then the leader of SBC has been Councillor David Parker, and David has been a doughty proponent of the railway ever since, and has helped to chart that way forward, which will culminate in the reopening in September.
many of the public have seen the railway as a mechanism of getting commuters to Edinburgh. I think it's absolutely vital that the railway is seen as bringing activity in the other direction from Edinburgh into the borders, and I see that in a number of contexts. One is potentially it'll bring tourists into the borders, taking advantage of the scenic railway itself, as well as taking advantage of the destinations at the end of the railway and located within travelling distance of the railway. Secondly, I think there are a lot of detailed business opportunities, such as we heard today in terms of web marketing, such as small transport schemes. Thirdly, I think businesses that are currently located in the borders can have the opportunity to improve their scope as a consequence of the connection to the capital. There's one business I know of that wants to find a location in the Borders Business Park because that will make it better and easier for his customers and for his suppliers to be commuting backwards and forwards from Edinburgh, and that will enhance the position of his business in the borders. And building on the last one, what I also want to see is the opportunity for businesses to locate in the borders, either their whole operation or part of their operation, in order to take advantage of that commuting link to Edinburgh. It's not for nothing that the Scottish Public Pensions Agency is located at Tweed Bank. There was seen to be a regional development advantage in terms of that public sector institution being located at Tweed Bank. I would certainly hope that Finance Services Company think about the possibility of perhaps doing some of their subcontracting or outsourcing from locations that can take advantage of the connection of the Borders Railway.